welcome to the Victorious Living Solutions podcast. I'm your host, Nikeya Young, and thank you so much for tuning in today. We have a very, very special guest with us on the podcast today. Her name is Myisha T. Hill. So let me go ahead and read you guys a little bit about Miss Myisha. Myisha T. Hill is a rare educator who comes from a place of compassion and profound emotional insight. She is leading a revolution of mind, heart, and soul, one that she now continues in her highly anticipated book, Heal Your Way Forward, which we are talking about today. Myisha's work changes how we experience the world by helping us understand our place within it. This book shows anyone interested in human liberation the way to heal, to hope, and to become true advocates and co-conspirators, not just for justice and change, but for the future of who we are as human beings. And that is a quote from Anna Paquin, an actress and producer, from the book Heal Your Way Forward. All right, let's welcome Myisha. Hey.
Hey, Nikeya, how are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. I can't complain. And if I complain, we can't do nothing about it. So I'm grateful.
Okay. I love it. You guys, in the spirit of full disclosure, Myisha and I have known each other for years. Probably since like 06, 07.
I think Micah was 2. He's about to be 18. So
yeah, like 16 years.
16 years. Yeah.
Yeah, somewhere
Oh my
around there.
gosh. Wow.
I know. Like, where did that time go? Crazy. So we went from, I think when we first started, we were into plus modeling. Myisha had a fabulous organization called Exchange. Exchange.
Throw the X's up.
Throw the X's up. Exchange in the building. If you know, you know, honey. So we were on the scene doing our plus modeling thing here in the Chicagoland area. We did the Miss Plus America pageant. Like, we just did different things. We were on our paths, and God led us to cross paths. And knowing you has been a blessing. Seeing what God is doing in your life just warms my heart because you are so deserving of it. And so, yeah, I'm not going to start. But anywho, happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me. It's a blessing. It's sometimes God puts people on our path and we start a journey together, but it doesn't mean that just because we take a certain road that the journey ends, right? God always can bring that intersection back. That X.
Yes.
That X you threw up. So that the X will always keep us connected, but there could be other deeper, like even Malik, when Malik was born, who was there? Nikeya, so we're super connected, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So this is a blessing.
I love it. You guys, we're titling this episode Racism and Narcissism, Kissing Cousins. Kissing Cousins. So, child, okay, first of all, Myisha has this book, Heal Your Way Forward. And I want to know, how did you get started with social justice work and activism and everything? Because this book, let me tell y'all, this is a hard-hitting book. How did you get into this work?
Oh, that's a really good question. So, well, Nikeya, part of my journey, as you know, it started when I went into the hospital after Naima was born, and I wanted to start something for people of color to talk about their mental health. So that evolved over the years. I created and founded an organization. At the time, it was called Brown Sisters Speak. And I was working in a therapy office as an operations manager with a white woman. And I was also working on another project with her that I'm not going to name, but it was really a powerful project. It's like something that if more people could do the project that I work with her on, like one thing she would always say is that we wouldn't need therapists anymore because a lot of times people just need to be in connection with each other to feel fully like human. So there was a point where there was a disagreement, and my disagreement with her had me questioning my mental health. And I'm asking myself, okay, wait a minute. Am I crazy? Am I delusional? All I did was set a boundary. Where's the problem? What's the disconnect with this woman who's a white woman? Whereas I'm speaking my truth and yet being met with all types of words, and she was victimizing herself. And then I got called a narcissist. And then she's like, we actually know we're just codependent. And this was a licensed clinical therapist weaponizing, one, her whiteness, and then two, her expertise
Yeah.
right?
Thanks.
Towards my experience. So we did try to restore the harm in mediation, only to be met with another therapist where they pathologized me, talked about my struggle with depression and anxiety. And I was like, wait, we're not here for that. We're not here to talk about anyone's mental health issues. And I didn't even bring them up. So
Yeah.
it was just an interesting dynamic. And the way I was raised, you don't throw people away just because they're white or just because of an experience. So I wanted to create something to really help white folks understand the impacts of their ingrained, internalized whiteness and racism. And that was called, I was like, oh, check your privilege. So
Yeah.
it started as an interview series in my kitchen. And then it moved into now we are a global international community of folk doing action around racial justice. We have a podcast, we have this book, we have monthly workshops and webinars specifically focused on white folks so they can do their work and
Mm.
like do their work on a deeper level so
Yeah.
that they can stop weaponizing their mental health, stop weaponizing whiteness against Black folks and other folks of the global majority.
Mm.
So it started from a place of pain and discomfort, and I wanted to use that experience as a piece of education. One, not only for white folks, but also for Black folks, because a lot of times, I don't know how you grew up, it's like, oh, if you see a white folk person, move off the sidewalk for them, give them their space,
Mhm.
stay away from them, let them own everything. And it's like, you know what? No, actually, we have the lived experience, we have the inner knowing. So let me do this to step up and show Black folks like actually you can teach and guide and lead in the anti-racism space, in the justice space if you choose.
Very good stuff. Okay, so let me find, before we get deeper into that, I'm going to read the definition of racism, and then I'm going to read the definition of narcissism. As you all know, all this season, we've been talking about the theme of the season is surviving toxic relationships. So, racism is the inability or refusal to recognize the rights, needs, dignity, or value of people of particular races or geographical origins. So that is an Oxford reference definition. The inability or just refusal to recognize the rights, needs, dignity, or value of people of particular races or geographical origins. All right. So what about narcissism?
Mm.
Keep that in mind. You can't even recognize the value of a person. There's something that all narcissists do that relates to that. So, narcissist is a condition in which somebody is only interested in themselves and what they want and has a strong need to be admired
Jesus.
and a lack of understanding other people's feelings. Okay. So they're only interested in themselves and what they want and have a strong need to be admired and a lack of understanding of other people's feelings. Here's some 9 different symptoms of narcissistic personality disorder. So the sense of self importance, the preoccupation with power, beauty, or success, entitled, can only be around people who are important or special, interpersonally exploitive for their own gain, arrogant, lack empathy, must be admired. Okay, so when you hear those kinds of things and the work that you do, I see you trying to hold in your laugh. What comes to mind? What are you thinking about?
You really want to know what I'm thinking about? I'm
Girl,
gonna
spill the
tell you.
tea.
When I hear you make that description, I actually think of a couple different one, a human being, a person. I'm
Mhm.
not gonna put race in front of it right now. Two, us in a system. And when I think of the system, I think of the system as what exists in the United States, the government,
Mhm.
right? The branches of government. I think of the educational industrial complex. I think of the prison industrial complex. I think of the social justice industrial complex. Everything is an industrial complex in America. And I have a quote in one of my books where I say, we as people in America are in a narcissistic and codependent relationship
Yes.
with the system, right? So
Ooh,
the system
yeah.
is the biggest narcissist that exists
Mhm.
because the system was created by a whole bunch of old white men who all they wanted was power and control. And what oftentimes has happened, and if you look at history, specifically the women's history movement that was founded by the suffragists, who not the black suffragists, but the white women suffragists, they duplicated that same movement with the women's empowerment movement.
Mm,
So that is another system that exists within feminism where white women want to exert that same level of power over people of color. And so when I think of that word narcissism, I'm gonna throw in here something that Susie Hill says. Everybody is a little bit narcissistic. I, shout out to my mom. Everybody has a little bit of characteristics of narcissists. And so I don't want to come on here and say, well, when I think of narcissists, I think of white people. I can't because
mm,
everybody has a little bit of it in them because the larger system that we're socialized to uphold has trained us all to be that way. Like
mm.
we are all duplications of what already exists. And so if I were to say anything, when I think of dominant culture, the dominant culture is America in America is white.
Mm.
So it's easy to say when I think of racism or racist, I think of white. But on a deeper level, I actually think of whiteness, not a white person. And
Gotcha.
all of us are socialized to uphold whiteness.
Now, very good. So let's talk
Okay.
about that a little bit because I know some people are like, what is she talking about? The whiteness, we're designed to uphold whiteness. So when you say whiteness, what
Mhm.
is a definition you could give to explain kind of what you mean and how we're all
Absolutely.
upholding it or conditioned to uphold it?
So when I think about dominant culture, I'll start there. That's easy. When I think about whiteness, I'm referencing what's known as the dominant culture. And the dominant culture in America is white.
Mm,
And white and whiteness have has created some aspects and assumptions of the white culture that are
mhm,
norms and values and preferences that a whole entire group of people are expected to follow. So,
mm,
for example, you're born into the world and everything is set in motion,
yeah.
right? Everything that you learned from your parents came from their parents' parents, but they were socialized into society a certain way. This is a framework that you can look up called the cycle of socialization.
Mhm,
So, depending on how you were socialized into the system, right? You are socialized to play certain roles, and those roles uphold oppression. And
mm,
it's how we maintain oppression. And oppression is like if racism was at the top, right underneath racism is oppression. So,
yeah.
most of us that we call people of the global majority, or Black folks, Brown folks, are socialized under oppression to have behaviors. We're trained behaviorally of how to be, how to act, how to show up in the world.
Mhm,
And it starts at home and then it gets reinforced in our institutions, our churches, our schools, TV, in our cultural, so our cultural practices, our language, how we think. And it's all this unconscious and conscious ideas of how to be and exist in the world. And over time, it's enforced
mm,
over and over and over again. And what happens is that it results in a cognitive dissonance.
yeah.
We often learn to shame and silence ourselves. We often participate in like horizontal and vertical violence against one another. And
Mhm,
at the core of being socialized to uphold a system, right? A culture of domination that enforces whiteness on all of us. At the core of that is fear and ignorance, right? And you have two
yeah.
choices: take action and heal your way forward, or stay in inaction and keep maintaining the status quo or maintaining the system.
Mhm,
So another way to think about it in Black culture is talented 10th. You had the talented 10th, and
mm,
then you had those that didn't fit within the constructs of the talented 10th. And so a lot of us in the justice space, depending where you land, would say folks who are representative of the talented 10th were the folks who were so close to whiteness that they didn't think that they were good enough to be in relationship with other low income Black folk or Black
mhm,
folks that didn't have a higher education level. The ideology of talented 10th in our Black culture is the closest thing to assimilation, is another piece
mm,
of really reinforcing whiteness.
yeah.
I
Very
hope that
good.
helps.
Yes, that helps a lot. And I know some of you guys may be tuning in like, okay, we're talking about toxic relationships. How did she get on race in this? I'm going to say a statement.
Say it.
Being a Black person, being a Black woman in America, and Black men too, but Black women, it's like we were the last of the last people to get any kind of rights and are still looked at as the lowest of the low of society in terms of, the way people are treated, working your way down through different cultures and stuff.
Mhm.
Um, and then when we talk about that, it's like, oh, she's angry. It's a whole other thing. So I would say it feels a lot like we're in a toxic relationship with our country.
Absolutely. 110%.
And
And
not even just our country, because we get the same treatment worldwide. It's like, who just woke up one day and decided that, you know, to crap on us? Like, who collectively decided this? So, yeah, that's how we got on the
it's
topic, in case anyone's wondering.
absolutely because we are. I'm gonna agree with that statement, Nakia. We are.
Yeah.
We have been since enslavement, since they started bringing us over on slave ships. You know what I'm saying? Like there's the not Reverend Angela Davis. Angela Davis has a beautiful book called Women, Race, and Class, where
Mm,
she talks about this experience about Black women. Bell Hooks has a book called Ain't I a Woman, where
yeah.
she talks about the degradation and the dehumanization of Black women and what that has been for Black women. My friend Ebony Janice has a book coming out in the summer called All the Black Girls Are Activists, where
Mm,
she breaks down how we as Black women are at the literally the bottom of the barrel,
yeah.
right? The most hated, the most demonized, just like Black men,
Right.
right? I would say Black women and Black men are on an even playing field.
Hmm.
Some people may disagree because they'll take it back to the women's rights movement where Black men had the right to vote and Black men had positionality to power because they had voting rights. But regardless of the case, regardless of the gender, we as a Black people are at the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah.
We are at the bottom of the barrel, and we are always, this is going to be controversial, in toxic relationship with one another. Can we go there for a quick second? As
Yes.
Black people,
Yeah.
we are in a toxic relationship with one another.
Hmm.
We are, and that is because of the dominant culture, because of whiteness.
Yeah.
It causes us to have friction amongst one another and not really know how to be in community well
Yeah.
because of class, because of gender, because of religion, because of all of the ways that the system has set this up. But when it comes to toxic relationships, we are in this codependent relationship with the United States of America.
Mm. Now, describe what you mean by codependent relationship.
Well, narcissism doesn't exist unless there is a codependent
Mm.
that relays on them. So
Uh-oh, you went muted. What happened to the sound? I heard you, and then all of a sudden your sound cut out. And nope, I can't hear you.
that means these are broke. Can you hear me
Ah,
now?
yeah, yeah. There you go.
Okay. So codependency is typically it's a theory basically that says basically you enable another person's self-destructive behavior, right? So
Yes.
where a codependent would a narcissist has power over, the codependent enables that power over behavior with the narcissist.
Yeah.
And so what that can look like is it varies from person to person,
Mhm.
right? And what happens is that you almost have Joyce Meyer's book, The Approval Addiction.
Mhm.
It's almost like you're depending on the narcissist for approval of yourself, right? There
Mm.
is
Yeah.
this idea of fear of abandonment and
Mhm.
staying in the dysfunction, right? To feel
Yeah.
good about yourselves. And you
Mhm.
feel guilty when you speak your truth. And you are gaslit,
Yeah.
that's a narcissist tactic.
Mhm.
You feel gaslit when you speak your truth, so you continue to minimize yourself instead of rising above and stepping into your power. And
Yeah.
so when we think about who we are as a people, we can name the civil rights movement and all these movements, and yet we are still at the same place we were when Dr. King was alive. No one
Yes.
wants to speak that truth, but it's
Mhm.
reality, Nakia. And we really struggle with being too dependent on the United States of America and too dependent on white culture and white culture norms.
Mm. Now, I'm saying this because as you're talking, I fully understand what you mean, but
Yeah.
I also know the tactics of narcissistic people. So someone's going to hear what you just said and they're going to come back with oh, they're just being woke. They're, see, that's unpatriotic. And, these radicals, they're just encouraging people to hate their country. And if you don't like it here, if America's so bad, why don't you leave? This is the kind of stuff we get told when we speak truth to power in terms of what is
Absolutely.
happening. So
Mhm.
it's possible to be a patriotic person, a person who loves their country, and also realize that this country has a lot to work on. The two
And
can coexist.
and also, there's even a deeper conversation because even sometimes you can be patriarchal and anti-Black. So you
Mm,
can be, if you're telling a Black person, why are you complaining? You're being woke, you're being too radical, and you're not a Black person saying that, or another Black person, you're anti-Black. You don't
yeah,
like the fact that a Black person is expressing themselves and speaking truth that you don't agree with.
yeah,
It's the possibility that somebody is listening and they're like, whoa, I wasn't prepared for this. Whoa, how does this connect to where I am in my life? Well, you got to start asking yourself this question. Am I in this codependent relationship with America? Am I, are there behaviors, right, that I uphold that cause harm to myself and other Black people and other white folk that I might be in relationship to?
yeah,
Patriotism is very similar to racism. It's a very similar behavior. So then the conversation is the question racism, because racism and narcissism are married,
yeah.
or is it racism, narcissism, and anti-Blackness?
Mm, yeah. Like the devaluing that happens in narcissistic relationships.
Mhm,
Okay, so here's a good example. In a narcissistic relationship, they don't just come straight out with the bad behavior. Things are always really, really good at first.
mhm.
And then after they've kind of put you up on this pedestal and you're just really enmeshed with them, everything is good, everything is hunky dory, you think like life is great, they build you up to then purposefully tear you down brick by brick. They start to point out little things about you that's not right or that it's designed to chip away at your self confidence. This
Yeah.
tactic that narcissists use is called devaluing.
Yep. And
Yeah.
a good example for that too, for people who are listening, Nakia, can be a work environment,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
You're a Black woman, Black man, you find this great job at this Fortune 500 company. You get in, they're praising you like, yes, we're so
Hmm.
excited for you. You're giving ideas. They're like, yeah, that's great. You're amazing. And guess what? You show up late to a meeting. You forgot to put a period at the end of a report. You start getting a little complaints like, oh, okay, well, we're starting to see there's some problems in your writing. I want to invite you to slow down, make sure that, you're checking your grammar errors or something. I'm just using the report, for example. And you're
Yeah.
like, okay, cool, no problem. Then next thing you notice like your white colleagues in the corner kind of looking at you. First they were hype about you, but now all of a sudden, all because of a period in a document, they're like, kind of starting to stay away from you. And then like a senior manager is like, yeah, you were great. And they'll just start finding little bitty things to nitpick. This is
Yeah.
what this is how it works.
Yeah.
Little things to nitpick about you. And because you got this great job and it's taking care of your family, you're like, it's all good. I'm gonna stay in it,
Hmm.
I don't have to have any boundaries. It's gonna be what it's gonna be. But you as the Black person are stressed out, overworked, burnt out because you're trying to prove to the company
Yeah.
that it's your managers and to your coworkers that you're the right fit for
Yeah.
the job
Hmm.
until you get to the point of burnout.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then when you burn out in these companies, you go tell oh, I'm getting burnt out. I don't know if this is the right job. They gas you up again. You're great. We love you here. We don't want you to leave. Please stay. We love what you have. You're great for our team. And then the cycle continues.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then eventually you lead to burnout. And the majority of us, after we go through this cycle so long in these spaces, what do we do as Black folk? We leave. Like, you know what? I'm
Hmm.
done. I'm
Yeah.
tired. I'm exhausted. Y'all figure yourself out. I'm not gonna fight. It is what it is.
Hmm. And
Not recognizing
somewhere
that
else.
that narcissist codependent
Yeah.
relationship you have building because
Hmm.
devalued to the point where you finally realize, okay, I'm gonna walk away from this now.
Yeah. And when you walk away from situations like that, because I've been in, that was a really good example. I've been in scenarios like that. You almost, not almost, you do. You have to take some time to decompress and deprogram your mind. And the reason I say that is because when you're constantly facing microaggressions of that nature,
Hmm.
you can't, there's no possible way to go through something like that and not receive a constant flurry of demonic um, messages about yourself. Things that are not said outright, but that are implied. And you have to sit, like, a good thing to do when you go through those kinds of experiences is to get a clean sheet of paper and just brain dump all of those messages out. And it may take front and back, and you may need another sheet of paper, depending on how long you were in that toxic work environment or
Yeah.
relationship or whatever it was, because those messages matter. And just getting them out on paper, you even feel the release in your pen as you're writing them. Like,
Hmm.
man, because you can't put it into words when you're in it. You just feel heavy. You just feel like something is really wrong. And when you finally step away from the situation, you can see with a clearer view of just how toxic it was and the impact that it had on your body, how
Yeah.
it triggered your anxiety, how you were, like, wow, I was just functioning really depressed and I didn't know it because I just was trying to keep going because I had bills to pay and I was trying to be a
Yeah.
good team member. Um, there was a moment after the Obamas got out of office where when Michelle put out her book, she was doing press runs for her book. And she just said, there was a moment after they got done where she just kind of collapsed and just burst into tears, like, whoa, like that. And people were like, what's wrong? What's wrong? And she was just like, that was a lot. That was a lot, you know? And she talked about just everything, just the weight of everyone's expectations, just the zero margin for error, like things that many presidents and first ladies did like before them that were way worse, that were not, no, every I wasn't dotted, every T wasn't crossed, and it was allowed to slide. But when the first Black couple got, in office, became president and first lady, all of a sudden perfection was expected, you know, like a big controversy over it. He wore a tan suit. Ah, like, really? All of that. It was her collective experience of being under a microscope.
All the
And
time.
yeah, all the time. And if you're not, this is one of those things that to hear us say it is one thing, but just to be a person of, this is what it's like to be a person of color in
Yeah.
this country. And yeah, so I don't know. I'm just
I
rambling.
think I like where you're going with that because that's the standard that you're held to all the
Yeah.
time. You're
Mhm.
always held to a higher standard, right?
Yeah.
And um, there comes a level of soul searching and soul care one must do to realize that they want to divorce themselves a bit from being held to that standard, if that
Yes.
makes sense.
Yes.
And I think what sometimes happens is we get held to that standard. Then, to my comment earlier, we hold each other to that same standard,
Mhm.
right? And then we start weaponizing those standards against each other, not seeing that now there's a point when you're dealing with narcissism where you're like, well, then you start enacting those behaviors on other people. You're like, well, am I a narcissist now? Wait a minute. And the deeper question is it's just the oppression,
Yeah.
literally.
Yeah.
After you experience so much oppression dealing with narcissism, you do kind of go through a phase where you kind of it does show up in other relationships and with other people.
Yeah. It's impossible for it not to.
Hmm.
Basically, narcissism, and we talked about this in some of the other episodes. You guys, if you didn't catch it, be sure to go back and watch. But narcissism is psychological warfare. Tactics that are used in narcissism, like gaslighting, we did a whole episode on that. Like, that's psychological warfare, to do something to someone and then purposefully try to make them think they're crazy, or that what you
Yeah.
blatantly did didn't happen. No one who is a normal, sane human being does that. Like, you only do that to intentionally cause harm to someone else. And so when you've been in under a system that has oppressed you that much and you don't take the steps necessary to heal
Absolutely.
your way forward, then hurt people.
That's it.
Yeah,
And it's so you have to be so conscious to it too, Nakia. It's like when you go through any type of narcissistic abuse, you have to become so consciously aware of the signs
yeah,
that you know that you can recognize it in yourself, and then you take the steps to heal that up so you don't enact it on others.
yeah, absolutely. So I want to ask you this. This book, you guys, and one more thing I want to say about the book. This book was written addressing white people who want to be allies, who want to know what can I do to
Hmm.
make things better. So that doesn't mean that if you're not a white person, you shouldn't read it. Everybody should get this. But if you've ever been like, man, I wish there was something that I could do, or can you educate me?
Yeah.
No, go read a book and educate yourself. It is not the job of the people who are being actively oppressed to then educate their oppressors on how to stop oppressing them.
My only disclaimer though is some of us do it. I'm one of
Yeah,
them.
we'll do
But
it.
don't go up to people like, oh well, Myisha said you. Myisha didn't say that. Myisha said that's her career choice
Hmm.
at this iteration of her life. So a Black person who does this work, I would say go to them first,
Hmm.
not like your coworker or like your friend from church.
Yeah, I would say there's some of us who are willing to do it, but I would say that it's exhausting for many of us. And so if you've ever asked a Black person to do that and you truly meant well, you really weren't trying to be like a Karen or something, like you really wanted to know more, you know what I mean? Because we can tell when somebody is just full of BS and when they really are like, no, I really just asked a question because I don't know. Like, I can listen to you, but I've never been Black. I've never been a person of color. So I don't know, you know? Um,
Hmm.
but it just becomes just one more thing we have to do.
Yeah,
It's so if you've ever been met with hostility and just for asking that question, just know that it comes from a place of
exhaustion.
we are so tired. Like, we're tired. Tired. That's the best way. I can't even find the word. We just tired. Like, no, like we don't want to do anything else. Don't add anything else to our plate if you can help it. Like, Google is free. Go on there and find some people who are doing work like what Myisha is doing and so many others. And then proactively educate yourself and bring what you've learned to the discussion. Like, hey, I was reading this book on this. This is what I learned. And, like come at it from that part, from that space. So,
It's it's so hard. I think we got to remember this is a culture of folks who I'm talking to white folks specifically right now. If you're listening, you come from a culture who's used to having things done for you, especially at the
yeah.
expense of Black people's labor.
Yes.
Kia's point, yes, yes, please go. We're not all just resources. There's YouTube, there's Google, there's TikTok, there's Instagram. There's so much information out there now where someone can just take a couple steps to educate themselves.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you this. What is, as you've been doing this work, what have been some of your biggest challenges? And then what have been some of your biggest triumphs?
Yeah, I think one of my biggest challenges is doing the work and then people still staying in inaction. It's
Mm,
like I'll teach a course or a workshop, and it's like, well, what do I do? And I'm like, I just told you what to do. So just listen to what I said, follow the steps. I think sometimes white folks want a blueprint, and sometimes I can't give a blueprint because the blueprint doesn't work for everybody.
yeah.
In the book, I talk about learning styles. I talk about disabilities. I can't tell everyone, right? Oh, well, just go watch this video, right? When a lot of people actually need to do more than watch a video.
Yeah.
They might need captions on. They might need to move while they're listening, right? Those of us on the spectrum need to have movement improved in all the ways that we learn. So I think one of my biggest challenges has been like addressing learning styles and then empowering the folks who get excited about the work to actually do it. There's one thing to come and learn about it, but it's another thing when you have to go do it. And a lot of it is the fear of failure. And
Yeah.
everybody feels failure in something in their life. But for white folks who consider themselves allies,
Mhm.
they're just like, I just don't want to fail. I'm just so scared. I just don't want to take a move. But if nothing happens until something moves, then we're going to be stuck in this same cycle.
Yeah.
So that's one of the biggest challenges, getting folks to actually stay in engaged action.
Yeah.
Um, One of my biggest triumphs, I think, another challenge I have too is I get a lot of pushback from people like, why are you wasting your time on white folks when you should be working with Black folks? And I'm like, I hear that. 100%. But do you know that there are white folks who are millionaires because they teach this or lead this work based on their college degree?
Mhm.
I'm someone who highly believes that life experience is a value as an important value to also maybe potentially having a degree.
Mhm.
Um, and that's something that white folks can't teach other white folks. It's from the lens of lived experience.
Yeah. That's true.
Uh, and so the pushback I always get is like, so it's okay for Robin DiAngelo to be a millionaire on a book called White Fragility, which is actually a book that actually is gaslighting white folks on why they should do this work.
Mm.
So a white woman can gaslight white folks, but someone who shows up with compassion and empathy, especially from my Christian upbringing and rearing, kind of leading in that way, is told to, oh, stop, this is not a space for you.
Yeah.
That's a challenge for me. It's like being told that that's not my place or space, but I take up space anyway. So that's a triumph. Um, and another triumph, I think, Nakia, just would be you just never know how something's going to go. I would have never dreamed that I'd be put on an international platform
Mhm.
just for trying to empower people to do better.
Mhm.
Like I thought the modeling was going to be the thing, right? Women's empowerment. I thought, the mental health for people of color, but to know that there was a different plan for my life and I get to work with people from all around the world, from Denmark to Germany to Canada to Mexico, and really help them like take the step on their journey to move past fear, get into action, while also giving back to my own nonprofit to help people get therapy stipends and therapy scholarships is a blessing.
Yes. That
It's
is awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. You guys get this book. Follow Myisha on all platforms. Tell them how they can connect with you.
absolutely. You can connect with me online. My website is myishathill.com. You got a cute little contact form. You just click that little button. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter as Myisha T. Hill, and I'm happy to connect.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. You guys, I want to close out with this shirt. You can't see it, but it says
You.
child of God. So
Absolutely.
we have lots of things, ways that we're all different, and lots of ways that we're things in common. But this is like one of those things we have in common. We are all God's children. He had a purpose for all of us being here. He didn't design all of these people of all these different nationalities and colors just for one to be deemed most important and everyone else to be the footstool of one type of person. That's not what God had in mind. Or else, I mean, if that was the case, like everybody just would have been white and it would have been no need for melanin and all this stuff.
Well,
So, what are you going to say?
now I'm just like, well,
Just saying. Just saying. So this is a book that you can get. I highly recommend it. Heal your way forward. Do the work. We can't afford to have our kids and their kids and their kids have to fight the same struggles that we've had to fight, that our parents had to fight, that our grandparents had to fight, that our great grandparents have to fight. We
whew,
all have to come together at some point and stop being codependents to racism.
that's it.
That's it. It's going to take all of us working together. So get the book and do the work.
Mhm.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Myisha. We love you so much. We're so proud of you and everything you're doing. Keep up the good work. And thank you all for tuning in. Keep living victoriously. Bye, everybody.